And here we go. Ready to start the funding year 2024 E-Rate Form 471 workshop. All yours, Lori.
All right. And are you seeing my opening slide there? Okay.
We are.
Okay, perfect. Because initially I had a green border around it and that went away, just making sure. Pardon me. Good morning, everyone. Looking at the list of participants, a lot of familiar names, but some new folks as well. So thank you for joining us. Give me just a second here. All right. So as we go through this morning's information, please, we'll be monitoring the chat. So you most definitely put questions there. But Christine, do they have the ability to unmute and ask questions verbally?
They should, yes.
Okay. So if you do have a question, it may be easier just to unmute, all right, and just ask the question.
Yeah.
So whichever you're more comfortable with.
It is a small group today, so we'll take advantage of that, right?
Exactly. Because by the time you finish typing in the question and I read it, it just may be easier. All right. So as Christine mentioned, this is the Form 471 training. Now, just a quick training agenda. We will talk about just a few basics, when we file the 471, just some prerequisites. Just a quick look at how do we get into the EPIC portal. So if you are new at this, when we're filing the 471, before we file that application, we have to enter any new contracts. All right. Or if you have an existing contract where the contract allows you to make a change, you may have an addendum that you would attach to your previous contract. All right. But we have to upload all of that into the portal before we can start the 471. Because once we get into the form, it's going to look at those contract records. All right. So we're going to walk through that before we actually look at the 471 itself. Now, when we start going through the walkthrough on the 471, we're going to look at several different flavors. Okay, we're going to look at what does it look like when you have a brand new contract. All right, so you're entering this funding request, brand new. What if it's a month-to-month service where there is no contract? We see that a lot, say, with our hotspots for our bookmobile or a kiosk. All right, where you're not locked into some contract term. So I'll show you what it looks like to do that month-to-month request. All right, we'll also look at, well, what if this is year 2 or more of a continuing contract? How do I put that on the Form 470? The portal, the way they've, designed this, if it is year 2 or more, we have the ability to copy from last year's information. All right, it's really slick, makes it very easy to pull that information over. And then the last example will be if you're applying for Category 2 funding, all right, specifically around internal connections, just so that you can see what that looks like. When you're asking for internal connections, that one's a little more, it's not hard, all right, it's just a little more tedious, all right, putting all of those items on. So we'll take a look at that. And then we'll finish the morning with next steps, what to expect, after you submit that 471. Now, I'm guessing this will take a couple of hours, 2.5 hours or so to go through all of this. We will be taking a break. We'll just, come up with a good stopping point around 10:15 or so. All right. So just know we will have a break in there because I'm sure you and I will both need it. All right. So let's talk about the filing basics. Now, the Form 471, this is the form where you're requesting the eligible services, all right? Whether it's that monthly recurring or, that recurring service or buying equipment. Now, with the 471, this form has to be filed every single year, all right? It doesn't matter if you're in year 3 of a 5-year contract. You file the 471 every single funding year, letting USAC know that, yes, I'm requesting that funding. All right, 471 every single year. Now, when we file the 471, we reference a Form 470. Remember, the Form 470 is that bidding form. All right, the 470 is the only application, all right, that as we go through this E-rate process, where you do not have to file the 470 on an annual basis. You only file the 470 when you're asking for new service. Say your current contract is set to expire this coming June 30th. All right. But if you're in a multi-year contract, let's say year 3 of a 5-year, you will reference the 470 you filed 3 years ago. All right. So you still have that 470 in the system that you can point to. Okay. But just remember, you always have to point to the 470, but the 470 does not have to be filed annually. Now, if you are filing a new 470 this year, then that form has to be out there a minimum of 28 days before you do the bid evaluation. All right, you choose your vendor, you sign off on the documents, indicate your selection. All right, before you can go to this next step of filing the 471. Now, we talked about, that if you do have a new contract, that we have to put that in the portal before you start the form. All right, before you start the 471. If you do have that month-to-month service, there is no contract, all right? If you're not locked into those contract terms. So there, you're not going to obviously upload a contract. So that's why we'll look at, this is what it looks like when it's a month-to-month service to pull that information onto the 471. Now, each year, the 471, we have that very distinct filing window. All right, and it did open at noon on January 17th, and it is set to close at 11:59 p.m., all right, on March 27th. Now, when we look at that 470, because you have to have that 28-day waiting period, if you are filing a new 470, the deadline to file that is February 28th. And I say this every year, do not wait until the absolute deadline. All right, because if you do, then on that 29th day, that's the earliest you can start evaluating bids. That's also the 471 deadline day. All right, so that means you're evaluating the bids, choosing your vendor, getting documents signed, getting things uploaded in the portal to be able to file the 471. All right, we've all been there. We've all had to do it before. And as I've said in previous years, it's not a good day to be you, all right, if you have to do all of that on that last day. So just a heads up. Now, all of this has to be done in the E-rate portal. I think, most of us are aware of that by now. All right. Now, when we file the 471, it's your choice if you want to file multiple applications. All right. So if you are filing what we call category 1, which is your internet, your bandwidth, all right, if you have, let's say you have multiple contracts there, you could put all of those on the same 471. The only requirement is we have to split this by category, all right? So if you are applying for both category 1 and category 2, the system requires you to split those, put those on 2 separate 471 applications. And you'll see once we start looking at the form, early in, it's going to ask, are you applying for category 1 or category 2? And as soon as you choose the category, all right, it formats your form. So if you say category 1, you're not going to see any options for Cat 2 at all. All right. So again, if you are applying for Cat 1 and Cat 2, be prepared to file the 2 separate 471 applications. Now, just a couple of prerequisites. The second one, the contracts we've already mentioned a little bit. All right. But entity profiles. Each year we have a period of time that we can go in and be able to, change information. For our libraries, it's primarily, making sure your street addresses are correct. Making sure that, your users are, set up appropriately. All right. It's also, if you are applying for category 2, making sure that all your square footage is listed, all right, per library branch, making sure that the correct information is in there, because that's how your category 2 budget is calculated. All right. But we had until basically midnight, or 11:59 p.m., I should say, on January 12th. Okay. So basically at midnight, USAC locked down the portal. So a lot of the, changes about our entities, all right, we don't have the ability to change. All right. But keep in mind that if you realize, the square footage for this branch is incorrect and I want to apply for Cat 2, all right, you can notify USAC of that change. You can put it on the 471 in the narrative. All right. So even though the portal has locked down our ability to change some of that, that entity profile, USAC can still make those changes in the background for us. All right. Now, I mentioned here about the full-time enrollment and NSLP counts for the school districts. All right, because remember, whichever school district is served by the main library, that's how your library system, that's how your discount rate is calculated. All right. So a lot of schools, a lot went in and updated their enrollment and those school lunch counts, but a lot did not. Okay. So they plan on doing that on the 471. The reason I stress that is when we go into the system and you look at your discount rate, be aware that if your school district has not updated their counts yet, it may change your discount rate. All right. So just keep that in mind. All right. So let's jump into the portal. So when we go to usac.org, right, /e-rate, all right, you're going to see the sign-in page. When we click on sign in, you have to do the multi-factor authentication. I think most of you know that. Now, I do want to point out, because I've gotten this question several times over the last couple of weeks, as far as browsers, this portal does not like Safari or Firefox. All right. So if you go to log in, it's common that, when you initially log in and it sends you the multi-factor code, all right, you may get that in either an email or a text, all right, that when it sends you that code and you put it in, it may loop back around and you have to ask for the code a second time. All right, that's fairly common. But if it just keeps looping and won't let you in, it's typically a browser issue. All right. So again, if you're using Firefox or Safari, you're going to run into that problem. All right. It likes Edge or Chrome. All right. So just a heads up that that's what's going on. All right. So once we do get logged in, you're going to see that initial menu. All right. It's a little confusing if you're new at this, because the menu options here, you've got this paragraph. All right. So for the E-Rate portal, you're going to choose the first one in the list that says E-Rate Productivity Center, EPC. All right. So you click basically toward the upper part of that paragraph. Now, when you first go in, it should take you to your landing page. All right. Now, just kind of a heads up, as you go through some of the options in the portal, you may get several screens deep. All right. And then it's, oh, I need to get back to my landing page. Okay. This is in essence your home page. All right. The way to do that is you have to look for the USAC logo. All right. So, if you're looking at your discount rate, you're drilling down and you want to get back to the landing page, I'll show you where you'll click on the blue menu bar. All right. And click on, say, news. That's the first thing in the list. That will then give you the logo. All right. But again, the logo is the shortcut to get back to the landing page. Now, it's really important, verify the information under, if you scroll down where it says My Entities. Now, if you're a library system, basically the system name, all right, your library system name will be listed first. That indicates who is the billed entity, all right, who's paying the bills. So when we look under My Entities, we'll see the billed entity listed first, and then any other branches that you have, all right, will be listed. Just look it over and make sure that everybody's accounted for, all right, that everybody's listed there. Now, if you see that, something is missing, maybe you have a new branch coming online, all right, there's no way for us to go in and generate basically the entity number for those sites. You have to contact USAC. You can create a customer service case in the portal. You can call USAC, all right, but they have to create the entity for us. So just a heads up if you do need to add a new building. Now, if we click on that first item in the list there under My Entity, all right, the library system, all right, that's going to show us summary information, all right, about our system, or obviously if you're an independent library, all right. Now, when we do that, all right, you're going to see that blue menu bar I mentioned about news, all right, that's a way of clicking there to get that logo, all right, but I do encourage you, one of the things you really need to check is if you come over, you'll see some other menu items here. Click where it says discount rate. All right, because again, if the school district went in and changed their enrollment numbers, those the National School Lunch Program counts, all right, that may have changed your discount rate. You want to make sure and verify that. All right, so if you click where it says discount, it's going to show you the counts, all right, that the district reported. So what's the total enrollment district-wide? What's the total, what we call free and reduced counts? And then as we look across, it's also going to show us whether you're a rural or urban district, school system. I can't say it. Sorry, library system. All right. I'm sorry, trying to change gears in my brain here. Library system. Are you urban or rural? And then it's going to say whether you are, what's your discount rate. All right, for whether it's, Cat 1 or Cat 2. Now, you'll notice when we look at Cat 2, comparing that to Cat 1, Cat 1 is at a 90% in this case. If you're at the highest discount rate, all right, 90% for Category 1, then you'll be 85% for Category 2. All right, that's the only difference between Cat 1 and Cat 2. It's when you're at that very highest level. So if you're at an 80% discount rate for Cat 1, you'll be at 80% for Cat 2. Now, another thing that we're seeing right now, again, I've heard from a number of you over the last week or so, where the discount rate had changed because that urban rural status had changed. All right, because until you hit 80% discount rate, all right, anything below 80, you get a little bit lower discount rate if you're designated as urban, all right, as compared to rural. But over the last couple of months, USAC has updated the portal, all right, to update to show the census, the 2020 census data, all right. And so for some of us, it changed our discount rates because we changed, say, from urban to rural, or in some cases from rural to urban. Okay, so again, it is what it is, because again, it's based on this updated census data. All right, but again, go in, verify your discount rate, make sure there's no surprises there. Now, when you're on this page, if you scroll all the way down to the very bottom, it's going to show you your Category 2 budget information. All right, it's basically the sum total of all the square footage, all right, the square footage of all of your branches. So again, this is how your Cat 2 budget is calculated. They look at that combined total, all right, what's that combined square footage, and then it's multiplied by $4.50. That's how your, what we call your pre-discount Cat 2 budget is calculated. All right, so if you're applying for Cat 2, check that number, all right, make sure that's correct. All right, because if it's not high enough, then you're shorting yourself, all right, in your Cat 2 budget. Now, if you want to go in and verify, if you've applied previously, say for Category 2, how much money do I have? What do I have to work with? So just to the right of where it says discount rate, you'll see Cat 2 budget. So when we click there, you may have to click a second time that says get Cat 2 budget. But then it's going to show you. So in this case, it's showing us the budget status is confirmed. That means that in a previous funding year, because our current Category 2 budget, remember, it's a 5-year budget cycle. So our current funding year, all right, the 2023-24 funding year is year 3 of that 5-year budget cycle. All right, so we're preparing for year 4. All right, so it just means that between the 2021 funding year and the 2023 funding year, all right, USAC has gone in and verified square footage, all right, to date. So it means that your budget's been confirmed. That has been verified. So it says, okay, based on that, 62,844 square feet in this instance, times $4.50 comes out to just a little over $2 million. As we read across, it's going to show us how much has been requested or funded to date. All right. So then it's going to show you, here's your remaining budget. Now, keep in mind that, in order to apply for Category 2, you do have to be CEPA compliant. All right. That's one of the hard and fast rules. All right. But if you are applying for Category 2, go in, verify, what you have there. I mentioned this is a 5-year budget cycle. So that means that we have this upcoming, 2024 funding year, 24-25 funding year, and then the 25-26 funding year. So we have these upcoming 2 funding years to max out that budget. If you don't spend your Cat 2 money, if you don't spend all of that, basically on July 1st of 2026, any monies left in that budget will get zeroed out, and then we'll basically get a new five-year budget allocation. All right. Now, one other thing, when we look at the budget, so we can see in this case, it's 1.8, almost $1.9 million. That is what we refer to as a pre-discount budget. It simply means that if you spend up to that amount, E-rate's going to reimburse you, whatever your discount rate is. All right. Bottom line, you are never going to receive that full amount. Okay. You'll receive, let's say your discount rate is 80%. You would get back 80% of that budget amount if you were to spend up to that amount. That has been very confusing for a lot of folks. So let me know if you do have questions there. And Christine, let me know if the pace is okay.
Lori, I think we are doing just great. Not seeing any questions. Keep going. We're good.
Okay. I always have to ask that because I do drink a lot of coffee. And sometimes when the caffeine kicks in and I get on a roll, just make sure, let me know if I need to slow down. All right, so let's talk about entering contracts. All right, so I mentioned that, if you have a new contract, if you have a change to a current contract, all right, we have to go in and upload this. Now, when we talk about contracts, all right, it may not be a formal contract. It may just be, maybe you're applying for what we call internal connections, the connectivity equipment, router, switches, access points. Okay, so, maybe you just have a hardware quote. So, and that there's no contract terms. So for the sake of E-rate, we still refer to that as a contract. All right. So you need to take that hardware quote. Some of those quotes will have a signature line. If not, you can just sign the bottom of it and make sure you date it. USAC's going to look at, when did you, formally choose this vendor? Okay, so make sure that that's signed and dated. You could also put something in writing. I always suggest putting it on letterhead. You could put something in writing that says, we've evaluated our bids. This is the vendor that we've chosen. All right. And then you attach that letter to the hardware quote. All right. Any of those will work, but be prepared to get that uploaded in the system. So to start adding those contracts, we go back to that landing page under the My Entities and click on the first one in the list. All right. The build entity. Now, when we do that, right across the, right below that blue line where we have all those other menu options, all right, to the right of Cat 2 budget, you're going to see the option for contracts. Now, when we click there, it's going to show us, all of the contracts that you already have submitted in the portal. Now, keep in mind, once we upload a contract, we hit continue or basically submit it. If you go back and realize that you've made a mistake, you transpose numbers, say on a date or whatever, you cannot go back and edit it once it's been submitted. You have to basically start all over again and create a new record. All right. So if you've gone in and had to recreate things, that this could be pretty lengthy. All right. But it's going to show you here every submitted contract since we started using this portal back in 2016. But it'll show everything that's been uploaded there. And you'll also notice to the far right, you can click on view. All right. So if you're newer, you're not sure what's been uploaded in the portal, you can drill down, you can click on view, you can see all of the information, even the uploaded documents. So everything's archived there. All right. So to start adding something new, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, there's an option that says manage contracts. So we'll click there. All right, so once we click on manage, now I do want to point out here, it says contract type. There are two, all right? It's either the ones you've already submitted or the draft version. So when you sit down to, fill in this information, let's say you get to a hard stop, all right? You don't have the information that you need. You can click on save and close, You'll see that in the bottom right-hand corner as an option. So you can close this, this work. Then you can come back later and say, okay, on the contract type, click on the pull down and choose drafts. All right, it's not submitted yet. All right, you click on draft, it'll show you anything that's, sitting out there, not yet submitted. So you can click the box to the left, all right, and you can click on edit. All right, that's the only time you can edit, all right, because again, it hasn't been submitted yet. Just want to point that out there. All right, so in this case, we want to add something new, so click on add a new contract. Now, when we do this, all throughout the portal, just about everything asks for a nickname. This is user defined. All right. I suggest making it something where if you have to go back and look at it later, or someone comes in behind you, it's pretty clear as to what it is, what's contained within this record. All right. So, you can put the company name. You can say this is a 5-year contract. You can put in, the date range that it'll cover. All right. Again, just make sure that it's clear enough. If you have to go back and search for this later. I have seen some applicants say this is contract A, contract B, contract C, and then, years down the road have no idea, what's actually in there. Make it descriptive. Now, the contract number, that's not required. Some contracts will have an assigned number. All right. If not, I don't spend a lot of time going out looking for it. All right. It's not required. All right. It's your choice if you want to put that in there. All right. Nickname is required, however. Now we'll click on save and continue. Now it asks, would you like to upload a copy of your contract? And it gives you an option. Just know if you answer no to that question, it's a guarantee that the reviewers, all right, once you submit your 471, all applications go through review. It's a guarantee, all right, that the reviewer will contact you to say, okay, you need to send me a copy of that contract. Because they're going to verify, what's the service, what's the cost, what's the date that you awarded it. All right. So if you should have it signed if you're at this point. All right. Go ahead and do yourself a favor and answer yes and get it uploaded. All right. So when you answer yes, then you'll see the option to click on upload, go out, search for your document. All right. Now, if you may have multiple documents, it's up to you, basically upload those documents. Now, I've talked in the past about how important it is, because it is important, that when you do the bid evaluation, that you have that bid matrix. All right. So that you can justify why you went with one vendor over another. Do not upload the bid matrix. All right. That's not required. And that can just lead to more questions. All right. You keep the bid matrix in your files. All right. But I would suggest that you not upload that. Now, under the description, again, this is your option if you want to put some more detail in there, not required. All right. But again, it could help you if you have to go back and, search for contracts later. All right. So once we have that, click on save and continue. Now it's going to ask, is this contract based on a state master contract? All right, yes or no. Well, go back and, look at, what the service that you're contracting for, was this based on a state master contract? All right. Just answer accordingly, yes or no. Then it's going to ask, is this contract based on multiple award schedules? For most of us, the answer is no. All right. It just depends on, basically like the size of the library system. But again, typically that answer is no. All right. And then you'll also notice that after each question, there is that question mark. So if you want to, some more information, some help, all right, just click on the question mark there. All right. So we'll click on save and continue. Now it's asking, can other applicants piggyback off of this contract? All right. And again, typically that answer is no. What it's referring to, though, is this something where maybe, as a consortium, a contract was awarded that others, can also use. All right. So again, in most cases, that answer is no. But then it's asking, was this contract originally created by another applicant and then you piggybacked off their contract? All right. Now, if you are applying for, based on the OPLIN Omnibus 470, and say if a contract was awarded on your behalf, all right, then in that case, you could answer yes there. All right, and Christine or Don, if you can correct me, just to make sure I'm saying this correctly, all right, if an applicant is using the Omnibus 470 bids, is the contract is still under the name of each library system?
That's correct. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So again, because it's going to be in your own name, all right, answer no there. This is only if you are using a contract, somebody else's awarded contract. All right, so then we click on save and continue. Now it's going to ask about the 470 because I've mentioned repeatedly about how the 470 is required. All right, now it is going to ask you, was a 470 posted? All right, yes or no? All right, how many bids were received? You'll see that to the right. Now, when we talk about the number of bids, these are actual bids for the services you posted. We've all experienced, putting a 470 out there. There's a lot of companies that will send you spam type bids, where I know there's a company that sends out the same, 45-page PDF document for every 470 filed. Regardless of what you put on that 470, we all get the exact same 45-page document, and it shows sample pricing. All right, that's a spam bid, so you don't have to count that. All right, or if you get that email, I won't name the companies, but I know a couple that will send out an email saying, click here to get more information about our company. There's no pricing. That does not count as a bid. These are actual legitimate bids for the services that you requested.
And Lori, I will say that with the Omnibus folks, Don sends out an email and those you'll see the number of bids that you have there. We handle the spam bids for you.
Perfect. Perfect.
So I know what you're talking about for those,
Oh.
but maybe some of the other folks have not had the joy, and that's just as well.
It is just as well. It's become such a thing, okay? And it's a pain because the one company that sends out that 45-page document, last year he was sending me like multiple copies per 470, sending them to me in an email. Then he also started texting them to me. I wound up blocking the individual. So anyway, side there.
Lori, we have a question from Jeffrey. Yes. Are the bids received on file from an older contract as in the case of a category 1? So maybe we need to clarify. So Jeffrey, if you want to unmute yourself. Is the information pre-populated?
The number, so if you wanted to go back and look at, say, a previous contract, the count will be listed. You can look that up. All right. But in the portal, we do not upload, all the bids received. We just indicate the count. All right. So it's up to you or, whoever's filing on your behalf, to keep the copies of those previous bids. Yeah, because right now there's nothing in the portal where we upload, all bids received. That is something that the FCC over the last few years has talked about, creating a bidding portal, but there's been so much pushback. Spam bids, one of the main reasons, that if service providers have to go out to a bidding portal, upload their bid, and they wind up uploading spam bids, and then the FCC or USAC, all right, the management company for E-rate, does it fall on them to decide what's spam and what's not? All right, so we're keeping our fingers crossed that that's that bidding portal, that we're hoping that never happens. All right, because that's going to cause all kinds of issues. Okay, sorry, my rant for the day. And Jeffrey, to your point, yes, another good reason to keep the records. With E-rate, the document retention period is 10 years, right? And I say that, with a tone, this was not my bright idea. When we talk about the documents to keep, you have to keep all the winning and losing bids, a copy of your bid matrix. All right. So yeah, so you definitely need good record keeping. All right. So when it's asking, we still get this question here in the portal. Was your Form 470 posted prior to the funding year 2016? All right. For most of us, that's no. The reason it's asking the question, though, is this portal came into being in 2016 and nothing was archived within the portal. All right. Nothing got moved over. All right. So it's just asking, you know, was this prior to 2016? And then you have to manually key in that number. I don't know of any contracts still out there still pointing to, you know, a 2015 or prior 470. Not that I'm aware of. All right. Now it is asking for you to search for the Form 470. Now, I do want to point out that if you are basically using the OPLIN Omnibus 470, in this case, because again, the contract is between your library system, and the service provider, even though OPLIN went out to bid for you. All right. But you need to point to the OPLIN 470 number to show that, yes, a 470 was filed on my behalf. All right. So when we go to search for the 470, you can search on that 470 number. You can search by OPLIN's bin. All right. So basically, if you are, but this is what we did last year, if you are purchasing off of that, you know, based on that OPLIN Omnibus 470, you know, we can plan on doing some one-on-one training, stepping you through how to file the contract record and the 471. All right, that's what we did last year, and I'm more than willing to do that again this year. All right, so Dawn and Christine, you can work on getting those scheduled. All right, as we move forward. All right, so the default when we go to search for our 470 is by our build entity number. All right, so that's already populated for us. All right, so if this is a contract, you know, where you filed a 470, all right, you want to go out and search for your posted forms, it's automatically going to have your build entity number there, but you do have to come over and click where it says search, and then it's going to come back with every 470, all right, that's been filed since 2016 for this build entity. All right. So a couple of things you can do to sort the list, because you want to make sure that you point to the right 470. The column headers, all right, you can sort by those. So what I would suggest is click where it says allowable contract date. That means that 29th day from when you filed the form. You click on it once and it shows the oldest. Click on it a second time, it shows the most current. All right. So again, you just want to make sure that you are pointing to the right 470. Now, any 2024 470, so if you're filing a 470 for this, you know, the cycle, the form is going to start with 240. All right. First two digits denotes the funding year. All right. The start of the funding year. Third digit is the form type. All right. 470. So it's going to have a 0 there. All right. So we know this is a 2024 470. Now, you also want to verify the allowable contract date, because if you're trying to do this before you've reached that date, you're going to have a problem. All right. It's going to be a hard stop. You want to make sure, all right, that you've waited that minimum 28 days. Not to mention, if you've signed a contract before the 28 days are up, we have a problem. All right. And in the last, it does show service type. So if you did file, let's say you filed 2 470s for 2024, maybe one just for category 1, and then you filed a second 470 for internal connections, all right, category 2, it's going to show you the service type that was listed on that form. So just another way to make sure you're looking at the right application. All right, so we check the box to the left and then click on Save and Continue. Now, service provider account number, that is not a required field. All right, if you want to put it in there, that's your choice. But again, you don't want to you don't need to spend a lot of time looking that up. All right, again, it's not required. But search for service provider. All right, this is how we identify which vendor, which provider we've chosen. All right, so you can search by their SPIN, which is the service provider identification number. Most vendors or most providers will give you that number on your quote. All right. If not, just reach out to the sales rep and ask what that number is. All right. because it's cleaner to search by that number. So we can plug in the spin, all right? Or you can do a name search. Just keep in mind that depending on the provider, let's say, Verizon, all right? There are lots of different spins depending on the region of the country, all right? So trying to, guess which one is the correct one. That's why it's cleaner if you can get the actual spin. So in this case, I did put the spin, listed it there in the field, and I can click on search, and it'll come back with the search results. All right, it's going to show you the name of the company, if they're doing business under a different name, and also what state they're located in. All right, so you make sure that, yes, this is indeed the correct one. Check the box to the left, click on continue. Now it's going to ask the question, is this a multi-year contract, yes or no? All right, now if you're applying for that hardware, all right, the internal connections, those are not, very rarely are those multi-year, all right? It's basically equipment that you plan on, purchasing this upcoming year. All right, so in that case, the answer would be no there. All right, but, for our internet or bandwidth, for our branches, if you're doing what we call MIBS, Managed Internal Broadband Service, where you're contracting with a provider to manage your Wi-Fi, those are typically multi-year. All right, so answer the question accordingly. Now it's asking, what's the date you awarded your contract? Remember, this date can be on or after that allowable contract date, all right? Because the allowable contract date is the 29th day, okay? So that's the earliest you can start doing that evaluation and awarding contracts. So put the date in there. All right, so it's the date that you awarded it, save and continue. Now, this question, it can be a little confusing. It's asking, does this contract include voluntary extensions? Some vendors or some service providers will put in their contract, they'll state the initial term. Maybe it's a 36-month, or a 60-month, a 5-year contract. All right, but they may have language that says that, at the end of this initial term, you can extend this contract. A lot of them will say you get 2 1-year extensions, meaning that you could turn that 5-year contract into a 7-year contract. All right, but USAC asks those questions up front. All right, is that an option in your contract? Yes or no? All right, so go back and look at the language, make sure that it's clearly stated. Some contracts will say that, at the end of the term, it's just going to renew annually until you tell us to stop the service. That does not count. All right. We have to have a hard expiration date at some point in the future. Okay. So again, check your contract for the language. If it's going to auto renew, USAC refers to that as an evergreen contract. All right. That does not count. Now, the advantage, just so you understand, the advantage with these voluntary extensions is, at the end of that initial term, you can decide, okay, I'm happy with the service, I'm happy, with the provider. I'm going to go ahead and extend this out another year. The advantage is you don't have to go out to bid. All right. You can just go ahead and extend it that for that period of time. All right. Well, obviously, if there's nothing in your contract about an extension, just answer no and click on continue. If you answer yes, then it's going to say it's going to ask the question, what is the contract expiration date if you exercise all of the extensions? So USAC's wanting to know up front, what's the longest period of time you could take this contract out? All right, well, let's say this is a 5-year. So as we do the count up, do the math, all right, that 5-year term would give us an expiration date of June 30th, 2029. But let's say my contract says, but we will, you're allowed to do 2 1-year extensions. All right. So I could extend that out basically another 24 months or until June 30th of 2031. All right. It's like, that still seems unreal. 2031. Okay. Just do the math, look at your contract. All right. Count that up. But then it's asking, okay, well, how many extensions? Well, if this is a brand, how many do you have left? If this is a brand new contract, all right, well, I have 2, all right. I haven't used any yet. So you enter the number, but then it comes back and says, now, what's the total number of months that you have left? Well, it's brand new, starting this coming July 1st. So we've got our 60 months plus I could tack on an additional 24. All right. So I could take this out for a full, 84 months if I choose. Now, the reason they ask the questions this way is, let's say you do have those 2 one-year extensions, and and your current 5 years, basically, it ends this coming June 30th. So you decide, I'm going to use one of those extensions. In order to do that, reach out to your service provider. Sometimes they'll send you an addendum document. But as far as E-rate is concerned, pardon me, you could just put something in writing that says, we're going to use one of those extensions, and now my expiration date will be 6/30, all right, 2026. All right, we're taking this out an additional year. So what you would need to do is take that letter, here's my intent to extend that, here's my notification to the service provider, attach that to the original contract. So that way USAC can still see, yep, here's the original contract, here's the language that says the extension's allowed. Put the letter along with the contract, all right, and upload that. So you're going to answer these questions when you're using the extension. So now it's asking, okay, so what's the date if you use all the extensions? How many extensions are left? Well, I'm using one for this upcoming funding year. That means I still have one more left. All right. And then you count down to how many more months, could you take the service out? Like I said, this one's kind of confusing. Let me know if you have any questions. But like I said, extensions are a good thing because it delays that having to go back out to bid. All right, so save and continue. Now, we always get this question about pricing confidentiality. Is there a statute, rule, or some other restriction, where that prevents you from putting your provider's pricing out there? It cannot be, and I say this each year, it cannot be because the service provider said, no, I don't want you sharing my pricing. All right, that's not allowed. All right, but if you answer yes to this question, you have to upload, some state statute, which there are none. Okay, some basically some legal document. All right, indicating that you're not allowed. All right, so 99.9% of the time the answer is no here. All right, save and continue. Okay, now you'll notice, and I didn't point this out earlier, we've got all of the breadcrumbs here. All right, where we went from the contact information to the establishing 470, service provider information, and so on. So now we're at the very end, all right, the confirmation stage. So it's going to basically show us in a nutshell everything, all the information we just provided. The nickname, the answers to the piggyback and state master contract, the number of bids, all right, that you received, the 470, all of that detail, even the documents that you uploaded. Check it over carefully, all right? Because if at this point, if you click on complete, that information is locked in, okay? You cannot go back once you click on complete, you cannot go back and make changes. You would have to start the whole thing over again, all right? So if you realize that maybe you put in the, how many bids received, you put in the wrong number, just start clicking on back, go back one page at a time, all right, till you get to the appropriate screen, make the correction. All right, because once you hit complete, like I said, it's in there. All right, so I'll go ahead and click on complete. All right, then it's going to take us back and it's going to show you, okay, here's all your submitted contracts. Now, if you have another contract that you need to add, all right, just click on the blue add new contract. All right, just go through the drill again. All right, upload those documents. Because like I said, if you do not do that and you jump into filing the 471, not very far into the application, it's going to ask, how are you purchasing? Are you purchasing using a contract? And if you answer yes, it's going to say, okay, point to that contract. If you've not uploaded it, you have to get out of the 471, complete the step, get back into your form. All right, so I mentioned about, if you saved the draft, you clicked on save and close, click on the pull down, choose the draft versions, check the box to the left. All right, click on edit, picks up where you left off. All right, it is pretty straightforward. All right, so if you're done, you can click on close. All right, it will more than likely take you back to the summary page. All right, so click on news, you'll see the USAC logo, get back to your landing page. All right, I know that was kind of quick. Let me know if you have any questions. All right, let's continue on with creating the form. Now, I do want to point out here, if you did not make changes like to your square footage, okay, or your school district, all right, like I said, under the main library, if the district has not gone in and updated their student counts, those lunch numbers, all right, what's going to get populated on your form will be any information prior to January 12th, all right? So in most cases, if the district did not change those counts, it's going to look at whatever was out there for the 2023 funding year. All right, so a couple of ways we can get into the application. The easiest is in the upper right-hand corner. You're going to see all these shortcuts. So you'll see the FCC Form 471, right? So you'll click there. And the first thing it asks for is a nickname, okay? So again, make it something descriptive, because if you have to go back, if you have multiple 471s for this funding year, all right, so you can easily, distinguish one from the other. So here I put in, the funding year FY2024, meaning services that will begin July 1, 2024. All right, I indicated this is for category 1. And then I often put in, say the library's name, the library system's name. All right, so once we have that, you can click on Save and Continue. Now, I do want to point out in the lower left hand, I'm being dyslexic, lower left-hand corner, all right, you'll see the option to discard form. So, as we start the application, if you realize, oh, I can't do this yet, for whatever reason, I strongly encourage you, you can discard the application, all right, if you don't want to maybe, pick it up later. The problem we run into is, let's say you start a 471 and you have to close it. All right, go look up some information. A lot of folks forget where to find that previously started form, so they'll just start a new one. After the close of the 471 filing window, all right, so after that March 27th date, usually starts around latter part of April, the portal will start sending out emails saying, oh, you have an incomplete 471 out there. You need to get it submitted. Okay. Anything that was not submitted, it's going to start sending you those emails. So you can go to the form and click on discard form. All right. That stops those emails. I hope that all made sense. All right. So again, if you realized, okay, I didn't need to file this form, all right, you can discard it. So once we have the nickname, save and continue. Now, I do want to point out, if you have to get out of the form, how do I get back into it again? So you don't have all of those incomplete forms out there. All right. So if you have to step away from the form, if you come up on the blue menu bar where it says tasks, you'll see something that says create 471. Now, if it says create, it means something that you previously started. Okay. So, and you'll notice that that text is in blue. All right. It's a hyperlink. Click there and it picks up wherever you left off. All right, so to continue on, it's going, after we give it the nickname, click on continue, it's going to ask, are you the main contact, yes or no? All right, so if you indicate yes, then it's going to pre-populate, all right, it'll populate your contact information based on how you logged in. All right, now if you indicate no, you can go out and search for a different person, but that person has to have a portal account. All right, you cannot just manually add contact information here. Now, it also asks holiday summer contact information because, once your form is submitted, I mentioned all applications go through review. So USAC is wanting to know up front, is there a period of time where you're not going to be available, all right, to answer questions? All right, it's up to you if you want to provide that, or an alternate contact. All right, if not, you can leave it blank. And we'll click on Save and Continue. Now, this is where the form's asking, so for this, for this application, are you applying for category 1 or category 2? All right, cannot be both on a 471. 470, that's not a problem. 471 has to be split. All right, so in this case, I'm indicating this is category 1. Right, so as soon as I click that and I click on Save and Continue, my form will be formatted to only pull up category 1 services. If you choose Cat 2 by mistake and you click on Continue, all right, basically discard the form and start over again because it won't let you go back and change it. Now, the next several screens that you'll see, this is just information that the portal is pulling from basically, the information in the system, right, about your library system. It's just pulling that information onto the 471. All right, just look at it and verify it. There's nothing you can change, all right, as we're stepping through this. So it's going to indicate, are you urban or rural? What's the school district associated with the main library? All right, what that that school district's build entity number is. Are you a library system versus an independent library? And then that total square footage. All right, so again, just scan over, make sure that's all correct. All right, save and continue. Then it's going to say, okay, here are all the entities that we have in Epic. All right, say for this library system, the library names, if you've got a bookmobile, all right, that will be listed. All right, all of that info there. Save and continue. Then it's going to show us again, here's the information from that district. All right, so again, how your discount rate was calculated. So you know that for sure. But like I said, if the district did not get that information updated, right, by that January 12th date, the enrollment free reduced numbers may not be correct. All right, save and continue. All right, so this is where we get into the meat of the 471. All right, it's adding FRNs, funding request numbers. Now, I refer to this as part 1 and part 2. All right, so in part 1, this is where we're indicating, basically how are we purchasing, some of the dates. All right, that kind of information. Part 2 is where we drill down and we say specifically, if this is for bandwidth, what are our speeds? What is the cost? All right, so we do that in 2 different parts. Okay, so again, part 1 is where we're associating contracts. So we'll start that by clicking on Add FRN. Now, keep in mind, if you have multiple Category 1 funding requests, so you may have say a request for the bandwidth down to your branches. And then maybe you have, say, the hotspots for your bookmobile, all right, different company, different contract, all right? You can have multiple funding requests on the same application, all right? It does save some time, all right, putting those multiple funding requests on the same form, all right? That's your choice. All right, so we'll click on Add FRN. Now it starts out by asking a nickname, all right? So, because again, if you're doing multiple funding requests, you got to be able to distinguish one from the other. So here I said, this is for my FY2024 bandwidth. All right, again, user defined, right? Make it something that, that you'll recognize later. Now, if this is a brand new contract, so you filed a 470 this year, you got the bid, you awarded the contract, all right? It's asking this question, is this, funding request a continuation from a previous funding year? In this case, because it's a brand new contract, you're going to indicate no. All right. Now, we're not going to click on copy. I'll show you that later. Because again, this is brand new. You don't want to copy last year's information. Now, with Category 1, there's only one service type. All right. Data transmission and or internet access. All right. So nothing to select there. Already selected for us. All right, so continue. This is where it's asking, so how are you purchasing? All right, is this based on a contract? Is this tariff service, which I don't know of any in Ohio, or is this month to month? All right, so again, I mentioned like the hotspots, you may no longer be under, contract terms where it's just a month to month service. You can cancel it at any time. We'll look at, how do you request that here shortly. All right, so in this case, let's say it's it's this brand new contract. So I'll click on contract and then continue. So then it says, okay, we'll associate a contract. This is why you have to go through all those steps in that contract record first. All right, because again, if you didn't, it's a hard stop. You have to get out of the application. All right, complete that step, get back in again. All right, now, again, just like we saw earlier, the default is it's going to search for any contract record based on your build entity number. So that's going to be auto-populated for you. And that really is the easiest way to search. All right, so we just have to come over and click on the search button. it's going to come back with all of those contracts. Like we did earlier, all right, it's going to show every contract in the portal since 2016. You can sort these, all right, by the award date, all right? You have to click it twice to bring the most current to the top, all right? Make sure that, yes, it is the correct one. Again, this is where the nickname really helps. If you have multiple contracts, say for this upcoming funding year, right? Check the box to the left to select it, click on continue. Now it's going to basically populate how we answered those questions when we were uploading the contract, all right? The award date, what's the expiration date, all right? Whatever you entered there, if you use all the extensions, all right? All of that information. Now, because we said this is a brand new contract, we're not copying from last year, it's going to auto-populate the service start date, all right? Because it assumes that the service, is going to start with the start of this upcoming funding year. The earliest date that we can enter there or that we can have there is July 1. So it's going to auto-populate that, all right? But now it's going to ask, what's the date your contract expires for the current term of the contract? The information up above is based on, if your contract allows for some type of extension, all right? Here it's like, okay, well, what's the date if you don't use any extensions, all right? Or the contract doesn't allow for it. So this is a 5-year, all right? So did the math, it expires June 30th, 2029. Now this field, you have to provide the information, right? So again, not having extensions included in that date. So once you provide that, click on continue. Now, the system is asking, is there some, are you doing a big fiber build out? Are you doing dark fiber? Especially for our libraries, 99.9% of the time, the answer is going to be no here. All right. Like I said, this would be if you're doing dark fiber and there's some, large construction cost. All right. So again, for most of us, we'll answer no there. All right. And then we'll click on continue. Okay, so then we get to the narrative. So this is the last step in what I call part 1. All right, all of that contract information. So in the narrative, just give a brief, description of what it is you're asking for this funding request. All right, so I just said this is bandwidth to 4 library branches. All right, when we look at adding a hotspot, it could be, this is, basically hotspots for, 2 bookmobiles and a kiosk. All right, so just give just a simple explanation there. You don't have to get into details as far as bandwidth and all of that. We're going to be providing that information here in a second. Now, it does say you should also use this field to describe any updates to your entity data. So if, a lot of the schools will use this if they did not get their enrollment and those lunch counts in the system, all right, prior to that close of the admin window, that January 12th date. But you could also, if you're applying, say, for category 2 and your square footage is incorrect, you can put your square footage here. All right. If you have a new building, but you don't have an entity number yet, or you've requested one and USAC hasn't generated it yet, you can also state that in the narrative, that this is also service for, this additional branch. All right. So again, you can be descriptive there. All right. So, we want to go ahead and start with what I call part 2. So we'll do that by clicking on the blue button that says save and add or manage FRN line items. All right, so that's where we put in all of that detail. So we'll click on that blue button. All right, well, now it's saying, well, you don't have any line items yet. Okay, so that's what we're going to start on. So we'll click again on add new line items. Now, for the number of line items, that can depend. Let's say you have a contract, with the service provider, such as AT&T, Spectrum, whoever, and, maybe you have one level of bandwidth to one branch. Maybe it's, let's say, 100 meg to one branch, but maybe a gig to another branch. All right. So because there's 2 different costs between the 100 and the gig, all right, then you would list that as 2 different line items within this funding request. Okay, so go back and look at the contract. So if it's different speeds, different cost, we have to break those out into line items. All right, so we start this by indicating the purpose. So for this line item, all right, is this internet access that includes a connection back to your service provider? All right, so if you have a library branch, say out in a remote area of the county where there's no way to get, say, a circuit back to the main library, so maybe you're using like a DSL, all right, some commercially available service that's taking you back to the provider. All right, you would choose the first option there. For many of us, though, it is those data connections. All right, that's basically connecting the branch back to, say, the main library. All right, so if that's the case, you would choose the second option, where it's a data connection between two or more sites entirely within your network. All right, so again, just look at the type service. All right, so in this case, that's the option that I'm choosing. Now it's asking, okay, well, what's the function? So when we click on that, we're seeing fiber, copper, wireless, other, or miscellaneous. All right, other or miscellaneous could be taxes. All right, for most of us, it'll be fiber. All right, and then the type of connection. All right, again, when you click on type of connection, it's a very, very long list. All right, every imaginable flavor, all right, of fiber. Again, for most of us, we would choose Ethernet. All right, so once we have that selected, click on Save and Continue. Now it's going to ask you what's the basically the bandwidth amount. What's the download speed? What's the upload speed? For those point-to-point circuits, those are typically, it's the same speed up and down. All right, so in this case, we said it's 1 gigs. All right, again, look at your contract. All right, what service are they providing? All right, so again, most of those, bear with me a second, my phone is vibrating here. Sorry. All right, so again, for those fixed point-to-point circuits, up and down are the same. So, but you indicate the speed, and then you click on the pull down and choose, is that in megs or gigs? Now, when you indicate the download speed, it also will auto-populate for the upload. All right, but if you do have something that's different, so if you are using, say, that commercially available internet, like DSL, where maybe it's, 100 by 10 or 250 by 50. All right, so there you would, again, plug those numbers in. Now it's asking, is the bandwidth burstable? For most of us, that answer is no. If you answer yes, then it's going to want to know, well, what's the max, bursting, bandwidth? All right, so most of us just answer no there. All right, so once we have in the speed, we click on continue. Okay, so now it's basically, it's asking questions so that USAC can, basically understand, what does your network, or your WAN, that wide area network, all right, what does it really look like? Because it does not, basically it doesn't ask for a WAN diagram. All right, so it's asking, all right, we've already said these are data points between our buildings, but it's asking these questions again. Is this a direct connection to a single school, library, or NIF? That's what we call a non-instructional facility, like if you had a totally separate admin building, all right, where patrons are not served. All right, so is this a direct connection from one of your buildings, all right, back to your provider, right? Yes or no. If it's that point-to-point circuit, you're going to answer no to that question, all right? Because one end of that circuit is not going back, all right, to the provider. But then it asks, all right, is this a direct connection between your buildings, between, all right, your libraries, all right? So in this case, I would answer yes. Bottom line, you cannot answer yes to both or no to both, all right? One or the other there. Now, it also asks, does this include firewall service? So for our libraries, that's typically no, all right? Because either you're getting that from OPLIN or you may have your own firewall. All right, but typically not included with the service that you're purchasing. All right, so once we have that information, it's save and continue. And then it's asking for the cost. Now, you'll notice 2 columns. All right, to the left, it's asking what's the monthly cost. On the right-hand side, are there any one-time cost? All right, so maybe there's a small install fee. All right, if so, you could list that here under the one-time. All right, for most of us, we're just going to plug in zeros there. All right, but for the monthly cost, go back, look at your contract. So if, let's say you're asking for 3 circuits and the cost is $500 a month per circuit. All right, so we indicate what's that per circuit cost. So in this case, in my example, let's say it's $500. Is any portion of that ineligible? Okay, typically, all right, that's 0. All right, 0 ineligible cost. And then what's the monthly quantity? All right, how many different, how many circuits, all right, are you asking E-rate to cover? All right, so in my example, it's those 3 circuits going down to my 3 branches. All right, so I put in the quantity of 3. And then it automatically, because we said the service is going to start on July 1, it's calculating it based on a full 12 months, all right, for the upcoming funding year. Now, if there are no one-time costs, and I mentioned that's typically the case, put in zeros, all right, because the portal will give you an error message if you leave the fields blank. All right, so put in zeros there, all right, for the one-time cost, the one-time ineligible, and the one-time quantity. Now, the system will then do the calculation, all right, it does the math, $500 times 3 times 12 months, all right, that's $18,000. So that's what we call the pre-discount cost. Right, so before any E-rate discounts are applied. Right, so then we click on Save and Continue. So now it's asking, okay, well, who's using, who's going to be receiving those circuits? All right, so if it's going down to all of the branches, all right, in your library, you can answer yes. All right, but you'll notice when we look at this, all right, if your main library is listed there, well, if OPLIN's providing the circuit to your main library, right, then you would indicate no, and then pick and choose, right? In my example, the 3 branches that are receiving those circuits. All right. So again, just answer accordingly. All right. And then we click on Save and Continue, and then it comes back with the confirmation. So then when we click on Save and Continue that second time, all right, after the confirmation, then it says, okay, here's all of the information. Here's the calculation, all right, for that line item. All right, so we can see now it's the application number, or excuse me, the funding request number, all right, with .001, all right, so the first line item. So here's the function, here's the type of product, here's the quantity, all right, and then here's the calculation. So again, if you have multiple line items, it'll just basically keep adding those up. So if, let's say we had 3 circuits at 100 meg, but we have a 4th circuit saying going out to another branch at a gig, all right, so it has a different cost, I would click on Add New Line Item and provide the detail for that circuit, all right? So just create another line item if it's part of this contract. All right, if you're done adding all of the line items, you can go ahead and click on Save and Continue. Now, if you realize that you put the quantity wrong, all right, or you put the cost in incorrectly, to go back and fix that, if you click on, all right, that line item number, you'll notice it's in blue, it's a hyperlink. If I click on that number, all right, then I can, I'll get the option then, or I can drill down to edit it. All right, it'll just basically drill down and let me make those corrections. All right, but if you're done adding the line items, just click on Save and Continue. Okay, so once I click on Save and Continue, then it says, okay, you have 1 funding request in there. So again, it's going to repeat the nickname, that there's only 1 line item that makes up this funding request. And then we see the FRN calculation. In the previous screen, we saw the total cost, the $18,000. So the FRN calculation, it's taken that cost, multiplied it by your discount rate, whatever that might be, and it says, okay, here's the amount of funding that you're asking for. All right, so it shows that calculation. Now, I just want to point out here, because I talk about this part 1 and part 2, if you realize that maybe you made a mistake on the expiration date, all right, of the contract, where you need to go in and change something, all right, under that part 1. To do that, you have to click on the box to the far left, and then you'll see the option, all right, to edit FRN. If you can see my mouse moving there, all right, that will take you back to that part 1 to make corrections. If you need to make a correction to a line item, the cost, the quantity, all right, you can click on the funding request number, drill back down, all right, you can still go back in and make those corrections. Now, if this is the only funding request you're putting on this application, all right, then you can go to the final step of reviewing the form and getting it submitted. All right, but we'll look at certifying submitting it here shortly. All right, Christine, it's 10:16. Do we want to take a 10-minute break? This seems like a good stop
Lori,
point.
I think that would be great. I think this is a good time for that. So we will pause our recording.
All right, let's continue on. Let's talk about adding month-to-month funding request, because the way we do this is just a little bit different. All right, because again, remember when it's month-to-month, I mentioned like the hotspots for the bookmobiles, where, you know, after you've had them for a period of time, you know, you could get out of the service, you know, without any penalty. All right, but the way we put that on the form is a little bit different. All right. Now, I won't go through all the steps, all right, of starting a 471. But when we get to that option to add an FRN, because again, maybe you already have the funding request on the form, you know, say for the bandwidth for the branches. All right. So here I can click on Add FRN. Just like before, we give it a nickname. So in this case, I said it's my bookmobile hotspots. Because this is not, even though you've had the service, you know, for a period of time, we're not going to copy the information from last year, all right? Because again, you're not in a contract, all right? So we have to manually key in the information every year. All right, same thing as far as the type of service, data transmission, internet access, only option there, and then we click on continue. Now, in this case, when it's asking, how are you purchasing, then you're going to choose the option month to month. Now, keep in mind when it is month-to-month service, then we are required to file a 470 every single month. All right. So again, just keep that in mind. Now, I am going to make correct myself just a little bit. You know, if you are using what we call Cabio, the commercially available internet access, you know, it's the same type service any business in town, you know, can get from the local cable provider. All right. Remember, that's the only time we don't have to file a 470, you know, for the service, as long as the bandwidth is at least, you know, a minimum of 100 by 10, 100 meg download by 10 meg upload. That's the minimum. And the basically the monthly cost per location, per branch, does not exceed $300. All right. So remember, in that case, that's the only time you're not required to file the 470. Just want to make sure I don't confuse you on that. All right. But if it's for the hotspots, you have to file the 470 every month. All right. So when I click on month to month and I click on continue. All right. How many bids were received? Okay, so go back, look at how many legitimate bids. Because we don't have to do a contract record, the portal still needs to know some of this information. How many bids? What's the 470 number? All right, so how many bids? Was a 470 posted? Yes or no? All right, because again, if it's hotspots, you have to answer yes. All right, the default is to search by the BIN, the build entity number. We click on search, we go out and we find that posted 470. And we click on continue. All right, so we still have to provide the SPIN. We can either search by that or the service provider name, just like we saw earlier. Always cleanest to use a SPIN. Click on search, select the company. All right, and then we click on continue. Now, because we did not say this was a continuation from last year, all right, this is a new funding request. It's still going to put in that 7/1/2024 as the service start date, first day of the upcoming funding year. But then it's asking, so when will the service end? When this is a month-to-month service, all right, and you're anticipating, you know, using this service throughout the upcoming funding year, then you put June 30th, in this case 2025, as the expiration date. All right, because when it's month to month, you literally you cannot go beyond the initial 12 months. All right, or the 12 months of the year. So we plug in that date and we click on continue. Now, It's asking about the pricing confidentiality, like we saw earlier under the contract module. All right, so indicate no and continue. All right, now we see those same questions. Is this is this a fiber build out? No. All right, continue. So these are pretty quick, pretty easy to add. Now, for the narrative, I indicated this is for 2 mobile hotspots to be used for a bookmobile. Now, I do want to point out something here because I've heard it several times, again, over the last couple of weeks. You may have heard, emails going out, whatever, that the FCC is now funding under E-rate Wi-Fi on school buses. All right. Well, this is different than what we have on our bookmobiles. All right. With our bookmobile, it's a hotspot that will allow you to do, perform library services. Right. Not to give, patrons, standing around the bookmobile internet access. It's simply so that you can provide library services. All right. For that bookmobile, for that kiosk. All right. But I have seen, I personally have gotten a number of quotes when I filed the 470 for hotspots. I've gotten quotes from companies quoting equipment like you would put on a school bus. All right, so it's much more robust, heavy duty equipment. All right, so just be aware of that. So if you do get that type quote, all right, that really isn't, the hotspot service. All right, I hope I'm not totally confusing everyone, but like I said, I've already seen this, where some sales reps are confusing the Wi-Fi on the bookmobile to, the eligibility of Wi-Fi on a school bus. Wi-Fi on a school bus is to provide, all the students on that bus, access to internet all at the same time. All right, so again, more robust equipment. Okay, so we give it the narrative. Then we click on the button here to add the line items. Just like we saw before. All right, so here we're going to click on add a new line item. Now, in this case, when it's basically a hotspot, it is service going back to your provider, be that T-Mobile, Verizon, whoever. All right. So in this case, when it's a hotspot, we're going to choose that first purpose. All right, internet access, connecting back to our service provider. When we click on that pull down, this time we're going to choose wireless. All right. When we do that, then it says, okay, what's the type of connection? Data plan for portable device. All right. Now, the FCC has changed the form for the schools, all right, where they're going to get some different options. All right. But it's smart enough to know this is for a library or library system. Right. So it's you're getting a limited list here when you indicate wireless. All right. So it's a data plan for our portable devices. All right. Save and continue. Now it's going to ask for the bandwidth speed. All right. Just like we saw before, upload, download. Now, with a hotspot, if it's a 4G hotspot, we know we're not getting 4 gigs. All right. But it's hard to know, if it's a 3G, a 4G, a 5G, what those, what is that up and down speed? All right. So typically USAC does not take issue. All right. At least they have not up to this point. All right. If you just say, if it's a 4G hotspot, put 4 gigs up and down. Now, if a particular reviewer comes back and says, well, no, we want to know the actual up and down speed, let me know and we can figure that out. All right. But again, typically this is not an issue. We'll indicate no, all right, to the question about being burstable and continue. Now, just like we saw before, those yes, no questions. All right, here we're going to indicate yes to this first question because it is serviced directly back to your provider, and no to the second question because it's not providing a WAN connection, all right, between, say, your branch and main library. And then no for firewall service. All right, and then we click on save and continue. And then it's the cost. Now here for the recurring cost, go back and look at your current bills. Let's say your service is, $39.99 per month, but make sure to check, are there taxes? The Universal Service Fund, all right? Typically you're charged that. Okay, so make sure to include those taxes in that total per hotspot because those are eligible for E-rate. So don't short yourself. All right. So in this case, with let's say it's $39.99 plus $2.37 in taxes. All right. I went ahead and added it on that per hotspot cost. Okay, and then 0 for the ineligible, and then what's the quantity? So if you have 2 hotspots, all right, put the quantity in there. And then typically it's all zeros for the one time. Right now, if this is a brand new hotspot service, say where there is a charge, say for the hotspot device, all right, that's a one time, you can enter it there. All right, again, for most of us, it's just zeros. Save and continue. All right, so now it's asking, okay, is everyone using these hotspots? Here we'd indicate no. All right, and you should have an entity listed as Bookmobile. All right, if not, point to your main library. All right, and then the reviewer may ask you some additional questions. Okay, so again, indicate no, point to the Bookmobile if it's listed. All right, click on add, and then you'll see the option to save and continue, and then you'll get the confirmation. All right, then it comes back just like we saw before. Here's your line item, here's the quantity, here's that eligible cost. All right, that $42 and change times 12 months, times the quantity. All right, so if you're done adding the line items for that, you can go ahead and click on save and continue. All right, so that's how we add those month-to-month services. All right, so you could do that whether it's the hotspot or if it's that Cabio, all right, that commercially available, or maybe you're not locked into a contract. Let me know if you do have questions there, because I know I went through that quickly. All right, so let's talk about copying an FRN. So if this is year 2 or more of a multi-year contract, then we have the advantage of being able to copy last year's information, which makes this really quick. All right, so again, I'm not going to go through all the steps here. Okay, so we add an FRN, we give it the nickname. Only this time when it's asking, is this a continuation, all right, of a previous funding request? In this case, we're going to answer yes. And then you would put in the 2023, the previous funding year, okay, which is our current funding year, all right, put in that funding request number. And then, and you'll see the note here that if an FCDL, a funding commitment decision letter, has been issued, all right, for the funding request, the approved amount, all right, will be copied. So if during this current funding year, if you put in a dollar amount and, maybe you transposed numbers or USAC took issue with it, all right, and so they adjusted that amount, the adjusted amount will get copied over, not what you originally entered. All right, so we click on copy, even though we've already said yes, and here's the funding request number, we have to click on copy. And then in essence, it's saying, okay, what do you want to copy? So we can search by the 471 number or the funding request number. Just copy and paste that number in again, all right? And just search by the funding request number. Again, that's much easier. So we plug in that number, we click on search, it comes back to say, okay, here's that information. So it's going to show us the application number, repeats that funding request number, the nickname you gave it for 2023, the type service, also that you can make sure that, yes, this is indeed the correct one. All right, so then we click on continue. Now, I do want to point out here, it's because, again, it's a question I get often, it's where do I find that previous information? You can do some digging within the portal, all right, to find that. What I use, because it's the quickest, all right, if you go to that E-Rate Central site, I share this every year, all right, so it's e-ratecentral.com. You'll see about in the middle of the screen some rectangles, different color rectangles there. Look for the gray one that says funding history search. You'll put in your build entity number. This is the hardest part, all right, knowing that number. So we put that number in, we click on the pointer there, that green pointer, and then it's going to show you all of your E-Rate funding history. So we would just come over, click on 2023, the funding years are hyperlinks, click on 2023, and then it's going to show you, here's the 2023 471s that were referenced, the funding request number, the name of the provider, the type of the type of service. All right, and then original request, it's basically the total cost for the year times the discount rate. So again, you can use those numbers to make sure everything calculated correctly. All right, but from here you can just copy and paste that number. All right, but again, just a quick, easy way to get the info. Now, once you click on copy, All right, the system basically goes out, and starts pulling that information over. Now, it's not going to go to the next step on its own. You're going to get this little spinning indicator. It'll sit there and spin. All right, this is where I tend to get impatient, especially the more coffee I've had that morning. All right, it'll just keep spinning. Give it about 45 seconds, a minute, click on refresh. If it's not done thinking, all right, it's just going to continue spinning. Give it another 10, 15 seconds, click on refresh again. All right, once it's done, then you're going to get the confirmation that says the FRN has been successfully copied. All right, now I do want to point out here in the text, it says copy FRN will not copy service start or and service end dates. All right, when we're creating a brand new funding request, not using the copy feature, all right, the service start date, that that July 1st date, is auto-populated. When we're copying, it will not do that. You have to key that in. All right, so we click on continue. Now it's going to show us all of those screens. All right, this is what we copied over. So, very little of this can you change. All right, so it's going to say that, once I click on continue, it's going to show, well, this is how you indicated how the service was, purchased, contract. You're going to be clicking on continue. All right, quite a bit here. So just click on continue. Now, when it gets to the screen, all right, asking for the service start and end date, all right, you have to manually key those in. So for the upcoming funding year, the earliest date you can put in is the July 1, 2024. All right, key that in. And then it's asking, when does this contract expire, if you don't use any kind of extensions. Again, this is probably the hardest part here, is going back and looking up, when does this contract actually expire? All right, and again, that information, it's going to be on your contract document. All right, or you can also look it up, look at last year's 471. All right, it'll be populated there. All right, but again, just verify that. Put in the expiration date. All right, and then we click on continue. All right, now it's going to show you, however, the fiber questions were answered last year. All right, click on continue again, and it'll even copy over whatever was in the narrative last year. All right, so if that has not changed, you just leave it alone. All right, now it also basically copied over everything for part 1 as well as everything for part 2. The quantity, the cost, is this a connection between the buildings? All of that detail has been copied over. All right, so there is no need, unless you want to check it. All right, you can click on basically manage the FRN line items, or you can just click on save and view FRNs. All right, so now it's going to show us that, okay, here's a new funding request. Here's the nickname that you gave it. Right, and then here's the FRN calculation. So it's a good idea because this is, again, that pre-discount cost times your discount rate. All right, make sure that that number doesn't match, what you had in there last year. Now, keep in mind, though, that if the district changed their enrollment numbers, those lunch numbers, remember, the discount rate may change and would affect that calculation. If you want to go in and look at all of the line items, all right, to verify information there, all right, like we looked at earlier, you can click on the funding request number. All right, it's in blue, it's a hyperlink. Click on the funding request number, and it's going to show you the line items. All right, and if you want to check any of them, you can click on those line items. All right, and drill down. All right, so again, copying works very, very well. Remember, though, it will copy whatever was approved for 2023. So any changes during the application review, that will get reflected on this new form. All right, so if you're done adding funding requests to your 471, all right, we're going to click on save and continue. All right, and the last step is actually basically submitting it, certifying it. So if you're done adding the funding request, click where it says review FCC form 471. All right, now when we do that, it's going to give us a couple of options. We can click on refresh. All right, and basically it's going to go out, all right, and start, thinking about your form. You do have the option to resume task later. So if you're not in a position right now to finish doing the certifications, you can save it for later. All right. you would just have to click on task to get back into the form. All right. Now, when I click on refresh, when we do this with the 470, all right, when, we get to the end, when we're ready to submit it, with the 470, it literally kicks us out of the application. All right. We have to click on task and get back into it again. All right. With the 470, if I click on refresh, all right, it's going to do that spinning thing like we saw earlier, copying the FRN. Give it, a minute, click on refresh again. Once it's done, all right, like I said, you may have to click on refresh a couple of times. All right, once it's done thinking about it though, you're going to get the screen. It's going to give you a document link. And I strongly suggest click on it, make sure everything's correct. So when you click on that draft, it's a draft copy of the 471. It's going to show all the information that you put on that form. If it's all correct, you can click on the box right below saying, yes, I certify it's correct. If you realize that, something is incorrect, click on edit form. It'll take you all the way back to the very beginning of the 471. So you just have to keep clicking on, save and continue till you get to the section that you want to correct. Excuse me, but it will take you, all the way back to the beginning of the form. All right, so the last step then is actually the certification. Now, if you are a full right user, we see the same thing on the 470. If you're a full right user, you'll have the option to continue to certification. If you're a partial right user, your only option is send for certification. So if you click on send, it's going to send it to all full right users in the portal, such as the account administrator for the portal. All right, so then that individual will receive an email as well as a task, all right, where they can log into the portal, click on task, and they'll see the option there to certify. Now, if you do click on send for certification, I say the same thing, with the 470 training. Don't count on the individual seeing the email because it may wind up in their spam folder, or even knowing what to do with it. All right. Make sure they know that there's something they have to do because until they've completed the step, all right, the 471's not submitted. And I stress that because we've had some applicants, over the years, not get their funding because this was not completed. All right, so we'll click on continue. We'll say we're full rights. We'll click on continue. Now, I do want to show you, this is what it looks like if you say you want to resume later, all right? Or if you send this to someone else, if they click on task, they'll see a task and this time it says review PDF for 471. All right, so you'll click on that task to basically complete this step. All right, but if you clicked on continue to certification, every place where you see a box on the left-hand side, all of those have to be checked. All right, I won't sit here and read all of these to you. All right, but anytime there's a box to the left, you have to check those. All right, so if you're doing this and there's another user in the portal, if you're not comfortable making these certifications, you can click on back and send it to someone else to complete this. All right, so in this case, we see 2 boxes there. You check both of those. Now, this part of the form has not changed from previous years at all. It's going to show us, here's the total pre-discount amount. All right. Basically, if you have multiple funding requests, it just adds everything together. Here's the total pre-discount cost. All right. Here's the funding commitment request on this form. So if you're at an 80% discount rate, it's going to be 80% of that cost. Here's the amount. All right. That second dollar amount. This is what you're asking USAC to fund. Right, or E-rate to fund. The third dollar amount, it says, okay, here's a portion, your non-discount portion that you're going to be responsible for. Now, we still see this text field where it says total budgeted amount allocated to resources not eligible for E-rate. All right. Initially, you're going to have 0 in there. It's not a required field, but sometimes the reviewers will come back and say, oh, you left that at 0. This has been a question since the beginning of E-rate back in 1998. What they're asking is, let's say you're asking for this bandwidth. All right. Well, but do you have, the resources, say, to pay the electric bills? All right. Any of those ineligible costs that has to be in place in order for this E-rate service to work. All right. Don't overthink this, even though I over-explain it. Don't overthink it. All right. Just put in a reasonable dollar amount. And it's not something USAC is going to come back and ask for proof. when I was an IT director at a school district, I had a tech budget of $75,000. So I always plug that number in. All right. But again, it can just a reasonable number. All right. Now, very, very important. There are 2 questions here. All right, where you have to click on the pull down and answer the question. All right. And as my note here says, just say no. Both of these questions, if you answer yes, all right, to either one of them, it's a program violation. All right, because answering yes to either one indicates that your service provider is basically helping you come up with, say, the funds to pay for the service. Over the years, we've had some service providers, say, if you go with us, we won't charge you that 20%, your non-discount portion. All right, those are all violations. So answering yes to either one of these questions indicates your service provider is somehow helping you. All right, just say no to both of those. Once you do this, this is just one really long screen. All right, here are all the other certifications. And like I said, they all have to be checked. All right, but definitely read through them, make sure you're comfortable with them. All right, so once everything's checked, then we click on certify. Then you get the pop-up saying, okay, here's the penalty for false statements. Remember, this is a federal program. All right, so if you're comfortable with it, go ahead and click on yes. Now, when you do that, it's going to come back with a confirmation. I always do a screen print of this, just in case there's an issue with the portal. All right, because we've had issues over the years, where, pardon me, it'll throw up. All right, have to, glitches. Make sure, save this information, print it out hard copy, print it PDF, whatever. All right, now, you can click here to see a certified if you want to save a certified copy of the form. I will tell you, this generally takes a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes for the document to be generated. All right, that certified copy. All right, but it does give us the option here to go ahead and click, to pull down that certified copy. All right, now something else I want to point out, it does show us the certification date. This is something that I've started, cautioning folks about, especially if you're filing your 471 on the last day, all right, on this case, March 27th, especially the later you get in the day. We've had some issues where it did not show the certification date or the time correctly. All right, and where it became an issue is, like I said, if you're doing this late in the day on that deadline, where it showed an incorrect date, basically the next day. All right, and it looks as though that you missed the deadline. So pay special attention to that date and time. All right, so once you're done with that, you can just click on close. All right, so let's take a look. I just want to show you what it looks like if you're applying for Category 2, especially internal connections. All right, I mentioned earlier, that this isn't hard. It's just that it can get tedious. All right, and I'll explain why. But let's take a quick look at that. Okay, and again, I'm not going through every step of the 471. Just know that obviously if this is a Cat 2 request, when you get to the screen, which are you applying for, make sure you indicate Category 2, all right? Because if you say Cat 1, you're not going to see any of the hardware options, all right? Make sure it's Cat 2, save and continue. You're going to get all of those screens that we saw before. Just keep clicking on continue. All right, now when we get to that screen, because we indicated this is for Category 2, if you did not go in beforehand and check your Category 2 budget, the form does give us a link because we said this was a Cat 2 request. It gives us a link here where we can go in and verify how much money do we have left. All right, because again, if you applied in 2021, 22, or 23, all right, how much is left? All right, but just like we did before, we start by clicking on Add FRN. Okay, we give it a nickname, again, something descriptive. When this is the internal connections, all right, equipment you're buying outright, all right, you're going to indicate no, all right, you're not going to copy. This is not based on a previous FRN, all right, this is based on a U470 that we filed. This time, all right, when we click on the service type, because under Category 2, there are 3 different service types, all right, basic maintenance of internal connections, meaning maintenance of router switches, access points, internal connections, which means the equipment that you're buying outright, or MIBS, the managed internal broadband service. All right, so if this is equipment that you're purchasing outright, be sure to choose internal connections. All right, and then we click on continue. Now, like we saw before, how are you purchasing? Well, month to month doesn't apply, right? Because you're not paying, a monthly recurring cost to buy the equipment. So the only one that really does, fit here is contract. That's why you have to go through that contract record, even if it's just, the hardware quote that you've signed and dated. All right, you have to make sure that you uploaded it in that contract, that contract portal portion there. So we'll indicate contract, continue. Just like we saw before, go out and search, find that uploaded document, all right, that contract record. All right, check the box to the left, make sure the of the nickname, the award date, make sure you're grabbing the right one. All right, now when just like we saw before, service start date, it will indicate July 1st. Now, a couple of things here. Remember that, and this is the only service where this applies. If you are looking at purchasing that equipment, okay, even though we have to put July 1, because that's the official start of the funding year, we are allowed to start purchasing or receiving the equipment as early as April 1st, right? 90 days before the start of the funding year. But even if, say it's equipment that you're going to purchase, whether you get funded or not, so you're going to go ahead and start that purchasing process, all right? We still have to put in that July 1 date. All right. Now, as far as the expiration date, we were given the 90 days at the start, prior to the start of the funding year. On the back end, we're also given an additional 90 days, all right, to get the equipment purchased and installed. Because, most applicants will wait until the funding letter has been issued, all right, because we're only going to buy this if we get funded. All right. So by that token, we're given 90 additional days on the back end. So what I strongly recommend, because I've had some folks saying, oh, I don't think that we're going to need that. Do yourself a favor. All right. Instead of putting June 30th, all right, in this case, 2025, go ahead and put September 30th. What, if you don't need that additional time, great. All right. Because let's say, you ask for equipment, we've seen issues, supply chain issues. If you have to change that date, it means filing additional paperwork. Okay. So that's why I say, do yourself a favor, go ahead, put in the 90 extra days, put in the September 30th date. If you don't need it, no harm done. Right. And then we click on continue. Pardon me. Okay, so then the narrative, just like we saw before, could just be a simple description. So in this case, I said we're requesting APs for each, and I apologize, it says schools. I did not update that. I apologize. So let's say it's for 3 of our libraries. All right, so then like we did before, we'll click on add the line items, because now we have to, give all that cost and description. All right, so we click on add new line item, click on add new line item a second time. Now, I used this example last year, all right, but I think it helped explain, when we talk about different line items. This is where internal connection request can get a little tedious, all right, because you look at that hardware quote. For every unique item that's listed, all right, that means you have to create a line item within the funding request. So when we look at this quote, and okay, so whether it's, Cisco, Meraki, Aruba, whatever, okay, not showing any preferential, treatment here. So whatever the manufacturer. All right, look at that quote. So we can see that there are 12 different unique things. All right, everything for, from the access points, the antennas, all right, stacking modules, okay, all of that detail. That means I'm going to have to enter 12 different line items. Now, I do want to point out here, because I said there were 12 unique items. Let's say we get a quote and we want it broken down by each of our branch locations, our main library, each of our branches. All right. So if you have a quote like that, all right. So in this case, you can see that for this first line item, all right, the access point for the East Library, it's the exact same make and model, all right, as I'm asking for my West branch. Okay. So then I can add those quantities together. Okay. Remember, if it's like, the exact same, item, you can add the quantities together. So instead of entering 8 different line items, I can enter 4, all right? And then the reviewer will look at the quote, all right, to figure out what's going on. All right. So again, just save yourself some extra work there. So again, if it's the exact same, item, same cost, just add the quantities together. Now, one other thing, and again, I've used this example last several years. All right, just so you understand where to find some of the items, because on the 471, they're under like basically some types of equipment. All right. So if you're looking for cabling or connectors, well, that's pretty simple, cabling connectors, then you'll see the option. Okay, is this for actual cabling or are these for connectors? All right, any of those pieces and parts. If you're asking for a caching server, is it equipment or service? All right, data distribution, let's say you're asking for a switch, you first have to click on data distribution, then you can choose between router or switch. All right. So again, just so you know where to find things, if I drop down to where it says wireless data distribution, that's where you're going to see the option for access points, antennas for access points. Is this a wireless, a LAN controller, all right, or a wireless controller? Okay, so again, just so you know where some of these things are located. Now, the things I've highlighted here in red, when you file a 470, all right, for these items, there is no, separate listing on the 470. There's some what I call catch-alls, all right, on that form. So like on the 470, there's something that says, antennas, connectors, and related components. All right, that's kind of a catch-all. So if you have transceivers, modules, all right, you may have requested it under there on the 470. On the 471, though, you can see that there are specific options. All right, is this a separate license? Is this a transceiver? Is this a module? All right, so again, the 470, the 471 are laid out just a little bit differently, just so you know where to find things. Now, miscellaneous, we'll see that as an option. That's where you would put if there's an installation cost, if there's a training fee, all right, if there are taxes, shipping, all right, we'll put those under miscellaneous. All right, so I'm going to get started, all right, clicking on add my line item. All right, so I want to add my access points. So I first have to click on the pull down for type of internal connections. All right, so this is where that cheat sheet comes in. All right, so first I choose wireless data distribution. Then under the type of product, when I click on the on that pull down, you're going to see those 4 options I was just pointing out. All right, so here it's access point. Then I come over and I click on the pull down and I choose the make. All right, is it Cisco? Is it Aruba? Is it Juniper? All right, choose basically the manufacturer. Now, again, it's just about every manufacturer you can imagine. So when you click on the pull down, instead of scrolling all the way down, if I'm looking for Meraki, just type the letter M. It's going to take you to the first M in the list. All right, so once I indicate the manufacturer from the pull down, then I'll get a text field where I'll manually enter the model of access point that I'm asking for. All right, so here it's just that model number. Quantities will come in here in a second. All right, then it's asking, okay, so for this, is this for installation? All right, is installation included? Or is this for leased equipment? All right, so typically those answers are no. And we click on save and continue. Now, just like we saw earlier when we were doing, the bandwidth, the hotspots, all right, this is a one-time cost. We're buying this equipment outright. So in this case, on the left-hand side under monthly cost, we're going to put in zeros on that side. However, you'll notice this is where it defines units. It's tucked over here on this left-hand side. All right, so we still have to click on the pull down and indicate for this cost, is it, for each AP, is this, let's say it's for cable, all right, a spool of cable, or if it's priced by the foot, all right, is it service or installation that's by the hour. In most cases, you're going to select each, all right, but again, you got all those options there, but you indicate that on the left-hand side. Then we come over and we put in the one-time cost. So you go back, you look at your cost, look at that quote. What's that per unit cost? So here I plugged in basically $13.99 each. All right, 0 of that is ineligible. And then what's the quantity? So if I'm asking for 30 APs, all right, that's what's on my quote. I can put in 30. Now, keep in mind, let's say you asked for a total of 30 APs and that's what's listed on the quote, but then you realize we only need 28, all right? You're not required to buy that full quantity, all right? This is indicating, though, here's how many devices you want E-rate to cover. All right, so I put in my quantity there and it does the math. I click on save and continue. Now, like we saw before, it's going to ask, who's using the service. If you know that, going in, that this equipment will only be used, say, at a new branch or a branch that, that you're currently remodeling. All right, if you know it's going to go only in that building, then you can indicate no, all right, and point to that library location. All right, if you're not sure at this point, or if it's going to be shared among your buildings, all right, you can answer yes to all entities being used. Now, keep in mind that this rule did change several years ago. Under the old rules, where each individual library had its own budget, that has gone away. So there is no harm in you indicating that, yes, all of my buildings are going to be sharing in this equipment. If something happens where you decide that, no, I need all of this equipment over in this other building, you don't have to notify USAC of that. You'll just keep track of, say in your inventory asset, where's that equipment located. So if you were to get audited, auditor shows up on site, you can say, this is where we install that equipment. But again, no need to notify USAC. All right, so once we click on continue, you'll get the, that confirmation of the entities. Then we get the option to add another line item. So again, look at that quote. If there are 12 different unique line items, you're going to be doing this 12 times. All right, I'm not going to go through all of those, so don't panic. So if I click on add new line item, let's say I have a license subscription for these new APs, maybe it's a 3-year subscription, all right? So in this case, my quote has, here's the line item for the license. So I choose license as the type of connection. You still choose the make. So it's a license for which manufacturer of equipment. So let's say it's for those Meraki APs. So just like we did before, all right, manufacturer, text field, put in the model that this license, all right, either the equipment the license will be used for, or if the license has its own part number, all right, you can put that part number in, okay, either will work. Like before, all right, no to the installation and lease purchase, all right, save and continue. All right, again, zeros on the left-hand side indicate, in this case, each. You put in that per unit cost and the quantity, all right, and then choose the entities. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to go through all of these, all right, but you can see though where I have added, 6 different items. My access points, the license, I added a switch, I added, a UPS that the switches will be plugged into. If I had some cabling connectors, some module, basically cabling connectors, all right. And if there was a cost for installation, all right. So, oftentimes, and this is the preferred method, have the service providers quote the installation as a separate line item. Now, when you go to put in, installation, when you get that yes, no question, is installation included? Well, yes, because it is installation. I hope that made sense. All right, so again, just keep adding those line items until everything is accounted for. All right, so once we've done that, we click on save and continue. All right, just like we saw before. All right, now, if that's the only funding request you want to put on this application, you click on review, get that application submitted. I do want to, and I'm sorry, once we get back to that screen, all right, to add another FRN, you'll see that we still have that view budget. Now, once you've added a category 2 request on the form, if you go back and you click on the view, the Cat 2 budget, now it's going to show, okay, here's your budget. Here's the dollar amount that you're asking E-rate to cover. And this is that pre-discount amount on this 471. All right. And here's how much you have left. So if you want to go in and check it again, all right, now it's going to show you, with this funding request deducted from that amount. Now, real quick, just to show you, if you are applying for MIBs, all right, this one is pretty straightforward. When we click on it, this is a brand new MIBs contract. So you just filed a 470, waited your 28 days. You're going to answer no to the question about copying. If you already have a multi-year MIBS contract, and this is year 2 or more, then you'd be able to copy the information, all right? Just like we saw with the bandwidth. All right, but when I choose MIBS, Managed Internal Broadband Service, from the service type, all right, now we get 3 different options here. All right, so you have to indicate, does this agreement, all right, does that include the management of equipment as well as leased equipment? All right, so again, that's an option with MIBS. Instead of you buying the equipment outright, the service provider can roll in the equipment, leased equipment, along with the service cost. I don't see as many libraries using that. A lot of the schools do. All right, or is this equipment that will be managed by a third party, but maybe you're purchasing it from someone else? All right, so maybe you're, totally different, maybe an online company you're buying equipment from, but you want another provider to do the management. All right, it's just letting USAC know, all right, go out and look for another funding request for the hardware. All right, or it could be managed service for equipment you already own. All right, so maybe you already have all of your APs that maybe you put in last year or the year before. All right, but maybe you've had a change in staff, or you just need the extra help, so you're going to contract with someone to do the management. All right, so again, you're just letting USAC know, I already own the equipment, I'm just asking for that management piece. All right, so choose which of those 3. You click on Save and Continue, and just like we saw before, then you'll put in that monthly recurring cost. All right, it's pretty self-explanatory based on the other, funding requests that we've looked at. If you are asking for basic maintenance, when we choose that option, it just asks what's the total quantity of equipment being maintained. All right, and then you put in, that cost. All right, you don't have to break it out to say, okay, we're getting, 40 APs and 10 switches. You don't have to break it out. It's just what's the total equipment. Now, keep in mind with maintenance, this one has gotten really messy over the last several years to get this covered. First off, it's typical with basic maintenance to do a multi-year maintenance agreement, 3-year, 5-year, all right? With those maintenance agreement, it's also typical to go ahead and get, invoiced for the full term up front. So you may be invoiced, in year 1 for that 3-year maintenance agreement. All right, but when you're filing for E-rate, when it falls under maintenance, you can only ask for 1 year's cost at a time, even though you're paying the full amount up front. All right, and there's lots of gotchas around the maintenance. I'm not, you may have heard, remember me saying this during the 470 training. I'm not discouraging you from applying for maintenance. Just know there's more hoops to jump through to actually get the reimbursement. So let me know, if you do apply and you run into issues there. Okay, so just like we saw before, you add the, all the funding requests, anything falling under category 2. All right, and then the last step is that, clicking on the review and getting it submitted. All right, I know I went through Cat 2 fairly quick. Let me know if you have any questions. Okay. Yeah, this is where I'm not sure, did I explain it really well or it's done silence? Okay, so either way, let me know if you have questions. All right, so what to expect after you file the 471? So what are the next steps? Now, if you want to go out and, look for, the 471s, if you want to go back, let's say you're new at your library and you want to go back and look at previous applications, from the landing page, if you go all the way down to the very bottom, very bottom of the landing page, you'll see a section that's labeled as FCC forms and post commitment request. All right, you have to choose the form type because 470 is the default. All right, so here I clicked on the pull down, chose 471, and then you choose the funding year. All right, so if you want to look at the ones that you're filing this upcoming year, choose 2024. Now, this is where you're going to see the application number, all right, as the hyperlink. That's where you click to drill down. This is where that nickname, all right, comes in handy. So if you have multiple applications, it's going to, all right, it's going to show that nickname. Now, when we go to search, we do have some options, All right, so don't panic if you don't immediately see your form. Check to make sure, are you searching for all 471s? Or is the radio button only showing incomplete forms, certified forms, or committed forms? Committed means you've already gotten the funding letter. All right, so again, just if it doesn't immediately show up, check the status. All right, what are you actually searching for? All right, I said, okay, show me all of my forms. All right, so when I look at this last column, or excuse me, the next to the last status, I can see that I have 2 certified forms, and there's one sitting out there that's incomplete. All right, so just so you know what you're looking at there. So when I click on the application number, all right, it's going to show me some summary information. All right, couple of things here. If you realize you made a mistake, let's say you transpose numbers, you put in the wrong quantity, you put in the wrong cost. All right, you can do what's called a RAL. Now, RAL stands for Receipt Acknowledgement Letter. It's just an old carryover acronym. All right, but it's basically where you can modify a form that's already been submitted. Okay, so to do that, when we click on the application number, you'll see those menu options, all right? Everything listed there. Go all the way over to the right-hand side where it says related actions. All right, when I click there, then I see the option either to respond to an inquiry or submit modifications. Now, I'm not going to go through all the steps on how to submit those, but if you go out to my my website, give me a second here. I'm going to put that in the chat there. All right, so if you want to pull it from the chat, but give me a second here. If I could get my fingers to work here. Oh, it's not letting me change my screen. All right, but if you go out to I apologize. So if you go out to my website, all right, that'll take you to what we call the resource page. All right, and it's in the top row. You're going to see today's presentation listed there. On the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see the RAL guide. All right, and it's all the screenshots, and it'll walk you through, all right, how to make those modifications, because you can change everything from something on the application. If you realize that you're asking for Cat 2 funding, but your square footage was incorrect, you can click on Entity. You can choose your building, and you can update your square footage from there. All right, so again, you can make lots of corrections there. All right, but again, that's out on that resource page. All right, so thank you, Don. Perfect. And I apologize. Like I said, I've got dual monitors, and for some reason, it's not letting me change my screen. Now, I mentioned that all applications go through a review process. So if you do get a review, it's called PIA, Program Integrity Assurance Reviews. All right, reviewers you'll get an email letting you know that there's some inquiry, all right, in the form. Now, when you get that email, there's typically a hyperlink that you can click on, all right, to drill down to the inquiry. Keep in mind, though, you have to be logged into the portal first for that link to work. All right. Let me show you basically another way to get into those inquiries. So if you get that email, if you go down to that very bottom section, all right, forms and post commit, search for your application, click on the application number. All right, there's one of 2 ways. I've got it highlighted here. If you click on related actions and then respond to inquiry, you'll also see here where it says review inquiries. All right, either one of those will work. All right, but when you drill down, then you're going to see any of the questions there. All right, keep in mind, it's if you put in an incorrect expiration date, they may ask for that. If you put in to change your square footage, they're going to want something in writing, indicating that yes, the square footage is correct. Now, with a lot of those verifications, that's something that Don can write those for you. I write the verifications on the school side. Don will write those on. I think Don or Christine will write those on the library side. If you add a new entity, a new branch, a new bookmobile, they're going to want verification of that as well, that yes, it really does, qualify for E-rate. All right. So again, those are the kinds of questions you can expect. Now, you are allowed, to make corrections. Like I said, if you put in an incorrect date, all right, you are allowed to make some corrections during that review process. Now, obviously, if you want to have all your documentation ready. So if you answered no to that, do you want to upload a copy of the contract? If you indicated no, then it's a guarantee they're going to reach out for that. All right. So have that documentation ready. When you get the inquiry, we're given 15 days to respond. All right. But if you drill down to the inquiry, if you need more time, you'll see an option there to ask for an extension. The first time you ask for it, it's an automatic, they'll automatically give it to you. They give you 7 additional days, all right, to basically respond. If they ask a question and you're not sure what they're asking, you can reach out to the reviewer. It'll list the reviewer's name and their phone number, right? You can call them to ask for clarification, or reach out. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Christine or Don, because we can drill down and actually see the questions. All right, so we can help you with that. Now, we go through all of this, for that happy day of receiving the funding letter. All right, I mentioned earlier FCDL, Funding Commitment Decision Letter. All right, so we'll get an email. They send you a nice, pretty PDF document that's really easy to read. All right, you'll also get basically corresponding spreadsheet. Those aren't as easy. All right, look at the PDF copy. But really important that you check it over. All right, because it's going to show you, basically the quantities, the cost, any changes made on the form. It'll also give you an explanation if something, was not fully funded. All right, so that way you'll know what took place. Now, very important, again, I stress this every year, check that letter over as soon as you get it, because if you realize that you made a mistake, that you didn't catch it during review, all right, or maybe your reviewer didn't catch it, or you disagree with the denial. All right, we have 60 days from the date the letter was issued, right? Not when you eventually get around to looking at it. All right, 60 days from the date the letter is issued to file an appeal. Now, if something was reduced or, something was denied, we appeal first with USAC. All right, we go into Epic. You'll see in that upper right-hand corner the option to, file an appeal. All right, and again, that's something I can help you with. I can give you verbiage. All right, but you have 60 days to appeal with USAC. Now, if USAC comes back and says, no, we're sticking with our decision, right, and you still disagree with that, then you get a second chance. You can appeal with the FCC. All right, but again, the deadline to file that appeal, that initial appeal, is 60 days from the date of that funding letter. Now, just a few more things just to be aware of, and I'm not going to go through all the steps on how to do this, but just be aware that there are some changes. These are some things that you can do after the funding letter has been issued, all right, but only after the funding letter. So, one of the first things is, making a spin change. So, I mentioned that, you can search by, your service provider by name. Well, let's say, you grab the wrong spin, all right? There's you'll see that in the upper right-hand corner, to file a spin change, and you just let USAC know that, I made an error, I grabbed the wrong company name. All right, so that's an option to change there. If, let's say, your company merges with another company and the company notifies you, that, oh, we've merged, now you need to use this spin, you would file that spin change. All right. The third example of spin change, let's say you contracted with a company, that, oh yeah, we can get that service for you. Then you find out months later that, no, we're not going to be able to do that. All right. Then if you can show that the original provider cannot meet the terms of the contract, then you are allowed to do a spin change there. All right. But very important, those are harder to get through the system. All right. This is where it's very important that you do the bid matrix, because USAC says if you receive 2 or more bids, then you can only do that spin change by going, with, the other company, the next, company that had the highest points on the bid matrix. All right. Service substitutions. So, we're filing this months in advance. So let's say you're asking for equipment, and you're going to wait until you get your funding letter. If you find out that the model that you previously asked for, let's say you just found out they just announced end of life for those access points. All right. And it's like, okay, well, I don't want to buy this model if it's going to be in the life here in the next, 9 months, 12 months, whatever. All right. We are allowed to do a substitution. And again, that's something that you would do in the portal. So as long as it's providing the same functionality, so an AP for an AP, all right, a switch for a switch, as long as it's providing the same functionality, all right, you can make that substitution. All right, keep in mind though, with the substitutions, let's say your original AP cost $500. If the new model cost $550, E-rate's not going to fund that overage. Pardon me. All right, but again, those things are allowed. The last piece I want to share with you, there's this kind of catch-all form. It's called the Form 500. If you realize you put down the wrong start date, all right, I actually helped a school the other day where the individual put down January 1 instead of July 1 for the start date. All right. So again, you can file the Form 500 to change that. You can also change the expiration date. If you realize you put the wrong date in. If let's say you're asking for category 2, and maybe you're under a construction project and you put down September of 2025 as the expiration date, but you realize that's being delayed, it's totally out of your hands, you can extend that out basically another full year, right? But you file that Form 500 to make those changes. If you need to cancel a funding request, maybe you ask for something under Cat 2, realize you're not going to be able to do it this year, you can cancel the funding request, all right? Especially under Cat 2, it's really important in that you cancel it so that way the money goes back into your budget. All right, so again, just some different things, all right, that you can do. That is pretty much the 471. And I'm just reading here in the chat. All right, and thank you, Christine, for the clarification. So Don writes the letter, but you can reach out to either of you, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And or just OPLIN support and we'll get you going. One of the two things that are important to realize after all of this information. One is we have been recording and it will go up on the OPLIN YouTube channel, so you can refer back to any part of this. And a second thing is, if you do have questions, yes, there you go. Lori's around, we're
I lead
around.
in.
I will say this is the beginning of my 3rd year working with E-rate directly. And I had heard tell that it takes you at least 3 years to feel like you know what you're doing. I think that is absolutely correct. But Lori has been invaluable to my learning, and always gracious, always generous, and really appreciate everything you do for Ohio's libraries and E-rate, Lori.
Thank you. It's my
wonderful.
pleasure. Yeah, I support libraries and schools, but I love the libraries. Not that I dislike the schools, but I love my libraries.
We are generally very nice in our communications, and yeah. So if folks are participating in the branch fiber expansion and you have questions on next steps with that, reach out to OPLIN here. You have that branch fiber expansion email. That is the best way to contact us. Jeffrey, you're welcome for all of the information. Any other questions? Affirmative and reassuring. That is what we want to hear.
Yes, that is my goal. Thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it.
Okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.